and assault on an entire generation's future. The COI's findings provide compelling evidence of the disproportionate scale of crimes committed by Israel, including flagrant violations of international humanitarian and human rights law. We concur with the COI's recommendations that the unlawful occupation of Palestinian territory must end immediately, including the removal of all obstructions to the full exercise of the Palestinian people's rights to self-determination. Malaysia reiterates its commitment to the Palestinian cause and will continue supporting the establishment of an independent and sovereign state of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, as well as the admission of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant de l'Érythrée.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have long passed the point of merely expressing concern of the ongoing genocide in Gaza. We find ourselves at a loss of words in the face of the atrocities we witness daily, displayed vividly on our screens, where innocent human beings, members of our shared global community, are being killed day after day, treated as though their lives are worth less than our own. The right to self-determination is an unchallengeable right of the Palestinian people. It is not a matter for debate. It is a legal and moral fact. As members of the international community, we have a collective responsibility to uphold this right. A just and lasting peace in the region depends on the Palestinian people being allowed to determine their own future, free from external coercion and interference. The state of Eritrea stands firmly with the Palestinian people. We recognize that at this juncture, words may seem insufficient. We also acknowledge that what the Palestinian people need is not just solidarity, but tangible, decisive action, something that the international community has tragically failed to provide. There must be accountability. Complicity in what is unfolding must also be confronted and addressed. We wish for the Palestinian people what we wish for ourselves: peace, freedom, and the right to pursue their own path for self-determination. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The Secretariat informs me that we can go beyond 1 hour for this dialogue. We have a bit of reserve on our program, so we will continue the dialogue until around 5:15 this afternoon. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Estonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Estonia aligns with the EU statement and thanks the Commission for its latest report. The suffering of civilians in Gaza is intolerable. The recent findings of the Commission of Inquiry concerning the deliberate and widespread destruction of Gaza's educational infrastructure are deeply alarming. This directly undermines the right of Palestinian children and youth to education essential to their personal development, dignity and future prospects. This is unacceptable. Such actions violate international law, directly contravene the principles set forth in the Safe School Declaration, which calls on states to protect educational facilities from attack and to ensure the continuation of education during armed conflict. We emphasize the importance of and call on all parties to armed conflict to fully comply with international humanitarian and human rights law and to take concrete steps to protect children, including by safeguarding the right to safe, uninterrupted education. Children's rights and needs must be upheld everywhere, including in armed conflicts. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Gambia.
Mr. President, my delegation aligns with the statement delivered on behalf of the African Group on the OIC and thanks the Commission of Inquiry for its latest report. The Gambia is deeply concerned by the deteriorating human rights and humanitarian situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem. The rising number of civilian casualties, large-scale displacement, blockage of humanitarian relief assistance, and destruction of critical infrastructure are unacceptable. The devastating attacks on educational facilities and religious and cultural sites represent an affront to the sacred principle of distinction, which affords protection to civilians and civilian infrastructure even in wartime. The consequences of the destruction of the education system in Gaza is a grave threat to the long-term regional peace and security, which the world must not neglect. The Gambia supports the recommendation of the Commission on the need for accountability wherever international crimes have occurred. Accountability is imperative to long-term peace and stability of the region. Respect for international humanitarian and human rights law is not optional. It is a legal and moral obligation. We reiterate our call for a just and sustainable solution that respects the rights and dignity of the Palestinian people. The Gambia stands firmly in support of its two-state solution in line with international law and relevant UN resolutions. We urge all parties to respect their obligations and call on the international community to intensify efforts for this de-escalation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Namibia.
Mr. President, we take note of the report of the Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem. We remain deeply disturbed by the persistent lack of accountability for violations and abuses perpetrated against the Palestinian people in the occupied Palestinian territory by Israel. We firmly believe that impunity is perpetuating rights violations committed against the Palestinian people and those who advocate for their rights. We are concerned about the systemic repression and the escalation in the crackdown on Palestine solidarity in many countries, especially in those countries who claim to be the champions of human rights. We firmly believe that the only viable solution to this conflict is a two-state solution based on the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. To conclude, we call on the OHCHR to take all the necessary measures within its mandate to investigate the grave violations and abuses against the Palestinian people. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant du Luxembourg.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Luxembourg s'associe à la déclaration de l'Union européenne et remercie la commission d'enquête pour son rapport. Ma délégation est profondément concernée par la souffrance continue infligée à la population civile à Gaza par les méthodes de conduite de guerre israéliennes et le blocage de l'aide humanitaire. Nous appelons les autorités israéliennes à respecter pleinement le droit international humanitaire et à rétablir sans tarder l'accès de l'aide internationale. Le Luxembourg réitère son soutien à l'UNRWA et son rôle irremplaçable de soutien à la population palestinienne. Nous appelons le Hamas à libérer tous les otages. Les attaques à l'encontre de la population et des infrastructures civiles palestiniennes doivent cesser, de même que l'expansion illégale des colonies de peuplement. Nous sommes gravement préoccupés par les destructions d'écoles, de sites religieux et culturels à Gaza et en Cisjordanie qui privent les enfants palestiniens de leur droit à l'éducation et compromettent l'avenir du peuple palestinien. La reprise d'un processus politique visant à réaliser la solution à deux États respectant pleinement le droit à l'autodétermination des Israéliens et des Palestiniens reste la seule issue vers la paix et la seule garantie pour une sécurité durable pour les deux. La bande de Gaza doit faire partie intégrante d'un État palestinien indépendant. Une paix juste et durable requiert également de mettre fin à l'impunité des crimes de guerre et des violations du droit international commises. Le Luxembourg salue le travail de la commission d'enquête et réitère son plein soutien à la Cour pénale internationale et la Cour internationale de justice. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant de l'Irlande.
President, thank you. Ireland aligns with the statement of the EU and thanks the Commission of Inquiry for its update. The findings of the report, President, notably that the education system in Gaza has effectively been destroyed, are of grave concern. The long-term repercussions are particularly worrying. As the Commission points out, this has a severe impact not only on Gaza's young people and on their right to education, but also on the broader development of the occupied Palestinian territory and the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people as a whole. We are conscious, President, that this report follows on from two other reports by the Commission since 7 October 2023, which together catalogue a litany of violations of international law. Here again, on this occasion, the Commission finds that war crimes, including wilful killing and the crime against humanity of extermination, have been committed as part of a widespread and systematic attack on the civil population. Ireland urges Israel and all Member States to heed the Commission's recommendations, as well as the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice issued in July 2024. It is imperative that all parties are held accountable for all violations of international law. Thank you, President.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante de la France.
Madame la Présidente, votre rapport le confirme, la poursuite de la guerre à Gaza est intenable. La reprise de l'aide humanitaire après 3 mois de blocage est insuffisante. Ses modalités contraires au droit international et ses conséquences pour la sécurité des populations catastrophiques. Tout en tenant compte de la gravité du contexte régional actuel, nous appelons le gouvernement israélien à respecter ses obligations internationales afin que l'aide humanitaire parvienne immédiatement, de manière massive, en toute sécurité et sans entrave à la population dans toute la bande de Gaza. La France réitère à cette fin son soutien aux agences des Nations Unies et à leurs partenaires humanitaires. Ils ont prouvé leur capacité à acheminer l'aide. La France continue d'œuvrer pour un cessez-le-feu immédiat à Gaza et la libération inconditionnelle de tous les otages et soutient les efforts des médiateurs en ce sens. La France n'a cessé et ne cessera de condamner les attaques terroristes du 7 octobre commises par le Hamas et d'autres groupes terroristes. Elle condamne dans le même temps la politique de colonisation israélienne qui est contraire au droit international et les attaques de colons violents. Nous nous tenons prêts au niveau national comme au niveau européen à prendre à nouveau des sanctions contre ces acteurs qui fragilisent la solution à 2 États. La France continuera d'œuvrer en faveur de ces objectifs en coprésidant avec l'Arabie saoudite la prochaine conférence sur la solution à 2 États. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante de la Belgique.
Thank you, Mr. President. Belgium aligns itself to the declaration of the European Union. Belgium is very concerned by the well-documented findings in the latest COI report about the widespread destruction of educational facilities in Gaza by Israeli security forces, greatly affecting hundreds of thousands of children. We call upon all parties to distinguish between civilian objects and military objectives. Also disturbing are the findings about attacks, demolitions and harassment by Israeli security forces and extremist settlers affecting education in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Attacks against schools and hospitals are a grave violation of children's rights. Israel is already listed in the annex of the SG's report on CAC, naming actors that commit grave violations against children, as are Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. We condemn these violations and urge Israel to engage constructively with the SRSG on CAC and to negotiate an action plan to end and prevent these grave violations. We deplore the destruction of the healthcare system in Gaza, as documented in the Commission's previous report, and call upon the parties to demonstrate respect for international law in order to preserve much-needed access to healthcare. Undermining the long-term perspective of a viable future for the people of Gaza by destroying access to education and healthcare is in no one's interest and will not lead to more security for anyone in the region. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant de l'Indonésie.
Mr. President, Indonesia thanks the commissioners for their report. We are outraged by the findings which expose a chilling genocidal intent to erase the Palestinian people from history. Over 15,000 children have been killed since 7 October. The relentless bombing of schools, the terrorizing of students and teachers, and the destruction of cultural and religious sites indeed are not isolated incidents. They represent a systematic assault on identity, memory, and the future of an entire generation, or to put it bluntly, to exterminate the Palestinian people entirely. Mr. President, enabled and protected by its allies, Israel acts with impunity, relentlessly violates international law on Palestinian land, and even expands its aggression beyond the OPT. Indonesia urges all states to cease any form of support for violations and to take concrete steps to ensure accountability. We echo the Commission's call for Israel to immediately end its unlawful occupation, stop all settlement activities, and fully respect the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. We ask the Commission, how do Israel actions such as blocking humanitarian aid and using starvation as a method of warfare contribute to the legal assessment of genocidal intent? Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante de la Grèce.
With the EU statement and thanks the Commission of Inquiry for its report. We remain deeply concerned by the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which has reached catastrophic proportions. The scale of human suffering is alarming. The widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure, large-scale displacement of the population and severe shortages of essential supplies have created an urgent humanitarian emergency. Moreover, the deaths of numerous humanitarian workers, UN personnel and journalists in Gaza serve as a tragic reminder of the imperative to respect and protect those working on the front lines of humanitarian missions. We strongly condemn the horrific terrorist attacks carried out by Hamas and other extremist groups on October 7, 2023. We call for the immediate, safe and unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid to all those in need in full compliance with international humanitarian law. An immediate ceasefire alongside the unconditional return of all hostages is essential to bringing a permanent end to hostilities. Finally, we remain committed to revitalizing the political process with the ultimate goal of achieving a two-state solution in line with relevant Security Council resolutions. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant du Pakistan.
Mr. President, my delegation warmly welcomes the Commission and thanks the Commissioner for its latest report. We commend the Commission for continuing its invaluable work despite challenges and Israel's deplorable refusal to cooperate or grant access. Pakistan condemns in the strongest terms Israel's continued genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza, and its instrumentalization of humanitarian aid. Reports of systematic attacks on educational infrastructure, places of worship, and cultural sites are deeply disturbing. Taken together with the suppression of Palestinian heritage and misappropriation of cultural sites, the illegal occupying power's genocidal intent is increasingly clear. Changing the demographic character of the occupied Palestinian territory is not only a crime under international humanitarian law, it also chips away at the most basic protections for people under occupation arising from inherent human dignity of all persons. Attempts to alter the Muslim and Arab heritage of Al-Haram al-Sharif and East al-Quds would only invite further insecurity and instability. The repeated storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex by Israeli occupation forces have demonstrated Israel's determination to escalate tensions and pursue its expansionist agenda at the expense of regional peace. Pakistan reaffirms its unwavering support for the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and calls on the international community to act decisively to prevent further loss of life and preserve the sanctity of holy sites. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante de la Mauritanie.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. يتقدم وفد الجمهورية الإسلامية الموريتانية بالتهنئة إلى دولة فلسطين الشقيقة على ما تحققه من مكاسب دبلوماسية متنامية ونشيد بقراري جمعية الصحة العالمية ومؤتمر العمل الدولي اللذين عززا حضور فلسطين ومكانتها في المنظومة الدولية بما يشكل دعما واضحا لحقها في تقرير المصير وإقامة دولتها المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية. سيد الرئيس، اطلع وفد بلادي ببالغ القلق على تقرير لجنة التحقيق الدولية المستقلة الذي وثق انتهاكات جسيمة منها الاستهداف الممنهج للمدنيين والبنية التحتية في غزة في سياسة ترتقي إلى جرائم الحرب. كما يدعم وفدنا ما خلص إليه التقرير من أن استهداف المدنيين في المدارس يعد جريمة ضد الإنسانية تستوجب المساءلة. كما ندين بشدة محاولات تهويد القدس والاعتداءات على المقدسات الدينية في انتهاك صارخ للقانون الدولي، ونؤكد أن الوضع الكارثي في غزة يتطلب تحركا دوليا عاجلا، ونجدد دعمنا لعمل اللجنة وندعو إلى رفع الحصار فورا وضمان الحقوق غير القابلة للتصرف للشعب الفلسطيني وعلى رأسها الحرية والاستقلال والكرامة. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la distinguée représentante des Maldives.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Maldives welcomes the comprehensive report of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory. We reaffirm our support for the vital work of the Commission and reject any attempts to undermine or discredit its mandate. Mr. President, the COI's report presents compelling evidence that Israeli forces have committed war crimes, including directing attacks against civilians and targeting cultural, educational, health and religious facilities. As concluded by the Commission, through these acts, Israeli forces have committed the crime against humanity of extermination, which has severely impeded the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. Considering these findings, we urge the international community to take immediate and decisive action to ensure accountability for Israel's persistent violations of international human rights law. The Maldives reiterates its call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and urges
Israel to allow unrestricted, sustained access for humanitarian aid to reach the suffering population of Gaza. The government and people of Maldives stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and assure our unwavering support for their legitimate and just struggle towards an independent and sovereign state of Palestine based on the pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem at its capital. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant de Timor-Leste.
Thank you, Mr. President. Timor-Leste thanks the Independent International Commission of Inquiry for its important report. We express deep concern over the Commission's findings regarding attacks on educational institutions and religious and cultural sites. Such acts not only constitute violations of international law, but also strike at the core of human dignity and the right of all peoples to safety, identity, and access to learning. We are particularly alarmed by the Commission's findings that since October 2023, more than 70% of the school buildings in Gaza were damaged and that education for children has been made impossible. Timor-Leste reaffirms its firm position in support of the rights of the Palestinian people and of all civilians in the region. We condemn all violations of international law and call for full accountability, the protections of civilian infrastructure, and underpin humanitarian access. Timor-Leste stands in solidarity with all peoples striving to live in peace, dignity, and security. Finally, Timor-Leste firmly supports a two-state solution as the only viable path to a just and lasting peace between Israel and Palestine, and we join the international community in calling for an immediate end to the conflict. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je ne crois pas que la délégation de la République populaire démocratique de Corée est en salle. Je donne donc la parole à la distinguée représentante du Portugal.
We thank the Commission for its report. Educational facilities should be safe havens. However, many have been deprived of their right to education due to the destruction of their schools and universities, particularly in Gaza. Where these remain operational, students live in fear of being attacked. The targeting of cultural and religious sites, the continued expansion of settlements and forced displacement have further undermined the Palestinian people's right to enjoy their own culture, their freedom of religion or belief, and their right to self-determination. Portugal condemns all acts of violence, the targeting of civilians, civilian objects and US facilities, as well as the use of civilian facilities for military purposes. It is paramount that all parties abide by international humanitarian and human rights law. We recall the ICG's advisory opinion and the obligation of Israel to protect the occupied population. All parties must cooperate with relevant HRC mechanisms, and we regret that that was not the case throughout the Commission's work. Portugal remains committed to a comprehensive, just and lasting peace based on the two-state solution, and we urge all parties to refrain from unilateral actions that may undermine peace efforts. We also express our concern with the recent escalation in the region and appeal for renewed commitment to stabilization. Members of the Commission, what steps can states take to mitigate the absence of in-person learning, particularly in Gaza?
Merci.
Thank you.
Je donne la parole au distingué représentant du Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the Commission of Inquiry for its report. Bangladesh strongly condemns the unspeakable atrocities on and indiscriminate killing of innocent Palestinian civilians, including women, children, older persons, and persons with disabilities since October 2023. We demand the permanent end of Israeli brutalities in Palestine. The flagrant violation of international law by Israel for decades needs to be addressed by the international community by holding Israel accountable and putting an end to the culture of impunity. Bangladesh reiterates its strong support for a lasting and permanent ceasefire, and we call upon the international community to refrain Israel from committing ceasefire violations. We call for rapid, safe, and unhindered provision of life-saving assistance to Gaza. We also call for undertaking rebuilding initiatives to ensure the rapid return of the displaced Palestinians to their homes. We call for full implementation of the provisional measures ordered by the ICJ relating to the proceedings brought under the Geneva Convention. Finally, Bangladesh reiterates its strong support for an end to Israel's occupation of Palestine and for a lasting and permanent solution that sees the establishment of a sovereign and independent Palestinian state along pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant de la République démocratique populaire Lao.
Mr. President, my delegation thanks the Commission of Inquiry for the report. The Lao PDR is deeply concerned over the critical situation of human rights and humanitarian crisis in the occupied Palestinian territory, especially in Gaza. We extend our heartfelt sympathy for the tragic loss of life and destruction to property resulting from the continuing violence. We strongly urge the implementation of an immediate and lasting ceasefire to facilitate the rapid, safe, and unobstructed delivery of humanitarian aid. The Lao PDR unwavering support the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination. In this context, we reiterate our consistent call for the revival of diplomatic negotiation aiming at achieving a just and peaceful solution with the goal of establishing two sovereign states coexisting peacefully in accordance with relevant UN resolution and international law. The Lao PDR are profoundly concerned over the increasingly volatile security situation in the Middle East, reaffirm our collective commitment to peace, justice, and human rights. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant de la République bolivarienne de Venezuela.
Gracias, presidente. Agradecemos la presentación del informe, el cual refleja el deterioro y la sistemática violación de los derechos humanos perpetrada por Israel, potencia ocupante contra el pueblo palestino desde 2023. En las conclusiones de su informe se señala que los ataques israelíes en Gaza han destruido el sistema educativo, teniendo repercusiones perjudiciales a largo plazo para los niños y jóvenes de Gaza, así como para la identidad del pueblo palestino como grupo, hecho que viola flagrantemente el derecho a la libre determinación. La Comisión ha constatado que las fuerzas de seguridad israelíes han cometido crímenes de guerra, dirigiendo ataques intencionados contra la población civil, incluso cometiendo el crimen de lesa humanidad de exterminio, al matar a civiles refugiados en escuelas. Todo ello mediante ataques aéreos, bombardeos, incendios y demoliciones de las fuerzas de la potencia ocupante, actos que fueron y son realizados de manera sistemática. Llamamos la atención a la comunidad internacional sobre el daño irreparable a los ojos de los pueblos del mundo, ya que este daño se le está haciendo al sistema multilateral de los derechos humanos, pues se permite la indefensión total del pueblo palestino, a tiempo que se justifica la impunidad con la cual actúa Israel en complicidad con los Estados Unidos y la Unión Europea. Venezuela reitera su condena y rechazo a la violación permanente de la ocupación, hoy convertida en exterminio por parte de Israel contra Gaza. Defendemos el camino de la paz como única opción para acordar la convivencia de la humanidad y respetar el sagrado derecho de la vida del pueblo de Israel y de todos los pueblos, del pueblo palestino y de todos los pueblos del mundo. Muchas gracias.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentant de la République islamique de l'Iran.
Bismillah Qasim al-Jabbari. Thank you, Mr. President. On 13 June 2025, the Israeli regime launched a full-scale act of aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran, killing at least 224 civilians, including women and children, and destroying protected civilians' infrastructures. This is not a military escalation or conflict. It is a grave act of aggression and a war crime in clear violation of subparagraph 4 of the Article 2 of the UN Charter and Article 3 and 5 of the UNGA Resolution 3314. This crime is a direct result of years of systematic international impunity afforded to the Israeli regime. These atrocities would not have been possible without the continued military and political support provided by the Western governments. In accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter, the Iranian armed forces have exercised Iran's inherent right to self-defense and responded decisively and forcefully. After killing over 55,000 people and attacking 3 sovereign nations, the Israeli regime's war machine showed no sign of restraint. No aggressor in our history has escaped justice. We will act with strength and uncompromising force to suppress threats at their inception. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I invite delegations again to speak to the item on our agenda in the current debate, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Mr. President, South Africa thanks the Commission for the report. Israel's targeting of the educational, cultural and religious life of the Palestinian people is not simply an aberration, nor an isolated incident. Rather, the very foundations of Palestinian society are being reduced to rubble in an intentional, concerted campaign which is aimed at erasing Palestinian life and survival as a group, eroding the Palestinian people's historical ties to the land and weakening their collective identity. Combined with the continued expansion of settlements, these genocidal actions violate the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, diminishing the prospects for a viable, independent Palestinian state, constituting what the UN Special Committee on Israeli Practices in the OPT recently warned, a second Nakba. However, notwithstanding Israel's clear and stated intentions, the Palestinian people exist, and their right to self-determination is inalienable and therefore can never be expunged nor subject to a veto. Accordingly, unless and until we as an international community live up to our legal and indeed moral obligations to bring a decisive end to Israel's unlawful occupation, together with its ongoing impunity, the unimaginable suffering of the Palestinian people will continue. We must act now and hold Israel accountable once and for all. Tomorrow will be too late, with irrevocable consequences for our shared humanity. I thank you.
Merci. Nous passons à la liste des institutions nationales des droits de l'homme et des organisations non gouvernementales. Je donne la parole à Institute for Angel Research.
Mr. President, I record this statement from Israel after another night of Iranian ballistic missile attacks on our cities. Since Friday, Iran has launched nearly 500 lethal missiles on Israeli civilians, wreaking destruction and destroying lives. The COI is now presenting its 8th report to the Council, but in the hundreds of pages it has produced, this commission has yet to say anything about Iran and its role in driving the Palestinian conflict with Israel. This omission is glaring. The COI claims it investigates all underlying root causes of instability and protraction of conflict. Yet it is silent as to how Iran is a root cause, with its genocidal agenda to destroy Israel and the terror armies it deploys to drive the conflict. Iran trains and arms Hamas and Hezbollah. It helped plan the October 7 massacre. Iran spreads the conflict across the globe, inciting anti-Semitism and violence, riots in the streets, and chaos on campuses. Iran is racing for a nuclear weapon to execute its malevolent aims. A reader of any COI report would know none of these facts, because this COI is not interested in presenting a complete picture of the conflict or its root causes. This COI plays into this campaign, manufacturing one-sided narratives that obscure the truth and serve to demonize Israel. Recent events provide a glimmer of hope that Iran's threats to eliminate Israel are finally over. Let's hope this is the end of the information war as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, before moving to the next speaker, I would like to request again all participants to deal with human rights issues before this Council with the necessary dignity and respect. While speakers may refer to specific situations by way of example for illustration, I call upon all participants to ask questions or make comments in relation to the scope of the current dialogue. I give the floor to the Palestinian Initiative for the Promotion of Global Dialogue and Democracy, also by video.
We thank the Commission for its crucial work and welcome its latest report, which once again confirms Israel's ongoing violations of international law, particularly the deliberate and systematic destruction of Palestinian educational and cultural institutions across the occupied Palestinian territory. The report provides overwhelming evidence that Israel has targeted and destroyed over 70% of schools in Gaza since October 2023, with many used as shelters at the time of attack, resulting in mass civilian casualties, including children. The Commission found that Israeli forces carried out these attacks with knowledge of civilian presence, constituting war crimes and crimes against humanity, including willful killing and extermination. Equally alarming are the findings regarding the deliberate targeting of religious and cultural sites, which is an assault on Palestinian history, culture, and spiritual life. This is a calculated effort to dismantle the Palestinian people's present and annihilate their future. It's time for the international community to move beyond statements of concern. What is unfolding is a catastrophe by design. We call on member states to uphold their legal obligations, including those under the Genocide Convention and those laid out in the ICJ advisory opinion, and take urgent, concrete measures to halt the ongoing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and policies of apartheid and occupation that continue with devastating regularity. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Benai Brit, also by video.
And 90 seconds does not allow for even scratching the surface of the errors, misrepresentations, and omissions in this COI's output. The Commission has again confirmed the explicit bias of its chosen members. In practically unsurpassable polemic rather than honest consideration of actual fact, the COI's newest report accuses Israel and Israel alone of undermining another people's identity, survival, and ties to a land. It accuses Israel and Israel alone of the crime of extermination, and it accuses Israel and Israel alone of possible genocidal intent. I urge those reading the COI's output to compare the expressly genocidal exterminationist rhetoric of Iran's leadership with the foundational documents of the State of Israel. I urge them to weigh Israel's military capacity alongside the diverse democracy it uniquely has built. I urge them to contrast Israel's establishing of peace with every willing Arab neighbor and its sweeping overtures to the Palestinians from 1947 through 2008 with the ideology and actions of Iran, a regime that has sponsored terrorism globally, impoverished its people while mass-producing missiles, and spent decades on an illicit nuclear program mere weeks away from a potential bomb. If this COI were interested in the root causes of conflict, it would show some interest in the open intentions of those who chant, "Death to America, death to Israel." Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, once again, I would like to request all participants to deal with the issues we are dealing with in this Council with the necessary dignity and respect, and I call upon all participants to ask questions or make comments in relation to the scope of the current dialogue. I give the floor to Human Rights Watch.
Thank you. The COI's vital new report documenting Israeli forces' systematic destruction of Gaza's educational, religious and cultural sites and war crimes and extermination underscores the long overdue need for concrete actions to stop the Israeli government's atrocities and hold perpetrators to account. The Commission and many others have highlighted the harrowing situation in Gaza and called for an end to the unlawful killing, starvation and destruction. Instead, Israeli authorities have continued these crimes and in many respects have escalated them. The ICJ has issued 3 rounds of provisional measures ordering Israel to prevent genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. States parties to the Genocide Convention risk legal liability for failing to act to prevent genocide. More countries with leverage are taking concrete steps, such as review of bilateral agreements and sanctioning of some Israeli officials. Those steps have already had impact, but much more is needed. States should immediately impose an arms embargo on Israel. 2, adopt targeted sanctions against Israeli officials responsible for ongoing serious abuses. 3, review with a view to suspending bilateral agreements with Israel. 4, commit to enforce all International Criminal Court arrest warrants. 5, ban all trade and business with Israel's illegal settlements. And 6, tackle root causes, including recognising Israel's crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. Words are not enough. Without clear action from all states, Israeli authorities show no signs of ceasing their campaign to exterminate and expel Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to International Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists by video.
Respetada Asociación Internacional de Abogados y Jurados Judíos, Congreso Judío Mundial y Unión Europea de Estudiantes Judíos. Mi nombre es Rebeca Buchbut, esposa del Elkana Buchbut de 36 años, quien fue secuestrado el pasado 7 de octubre del 2023 a manos del grupo terrorista Hamas. Elkana es padre de un niño de 5 años. Elkana más 3 padres que se encuentran en cautiverio, sus nombres son Omri Megan, padre de 2 niñas de 2 y 4 años, David Cuño, padre de 2 niñas de 5 años, Maxim Hakin, padre de una niña de aproximadamente 7 años. La vida y la dignidad no pueden ser rehenes de ningún conflicto. Han pasado 618 días de silencio, de miedo, de dolor. Sabemos por testimonios de rehenes que han sido liberados las condiciones tan inhumanas en las que viven los rehenes. Hambre, cadenas, aislamiento. Les pido que utilicen su potestad para que mi esposo Elkana, los padres que se encuentran con vida anteriormente mencionados y el resto de los secuestrados, que son en total 53, puedan regresar, ser liberados y regresar a casa lo más pronto posible.
Thank you. I give the floor to international lawyers for a joint statement.
Thank you. International Lawyers Org thanks the Commission for its report and reminds the Council that the already damaged credibility of this body is now hanging by a thread. The ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people, rooted long before the United Nations or this Council existed, remains the most serious, unresolved human rights situation on your agenda. The scale and duration of Israel's atrocities are without precedent in modern international law. We cannot ignore the deliberate, systematic destruction of a people, their homes, institutions, culture, and lives, carried out with impunity over generations. The Commission's findings confirm what the world is witnessing: starvation as a weapon, the bombing of hospitals and schools, and mass displacement. Every element of the crime of genocide is present. These acts have been committed with the intention to destroy the Palestinian people, at least in part, if not completely. Every state, party to the Genocide Convention, is obligated not only to prevent and punish genocide, but to take all lawful measures to stop it. All perpetrators must be prosecuted and full justice delivered to the victims, including their right to self-determination and reparations. Genocide is not only a crime, it is a call to action. We call upon the Commission to recognize that genocide is being committed by Israel against the Palestinian people. We urge this Council to unambiguously call upon all states to fulfill their obligations under the Genocide Convention. History will judge the silence of this body as complicity unless it acts immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Kiam Rehabilitation Center.
السيد الرئيس، السادة أعضاء المجلس، جئتكم اليوم محملا برسالة قافلة العدالة التي انطلقت يوم 11 جوان من أمام محكمة العدل الدولية، وجابت عواصم أوروبية عدة تعد مراكز صناعة للقرار، بهدف تسليط الضوء على الانتهاكات اللا إنسانية التي يتعرض لها الأسرى الفلسطينيون في سجون الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. إن قافلة العدالة حظيت بدعم أكثر من 150 مؤسسة حقوقية ودولية تمثل حراكا مدنيا واسعا يجسد تلاحما بين المدافعين عن الحق الفلسطيني في الميدان الأوروبي مع منظمات المجتمع المدني من أجل وضع حد للمجازر الصامتة التي ترتكب بحق آلاف الأسرى الفلسطينيين، ومن أجل ضمان مساءلة مرتكبي الانتهاكات وإنصاف الضحايا. لقد خاطبنا هذا المجلس مرارا مطالبين بتفعيل أدوات المحاسبة الدولية تجاه سلطات الاحتلال التي باتت انتهاكاتها تشكل عبئا أخلاقيا وقانونيا على النظام الدولي برمته. وعليه فإن مركز الخيام لتأهيل ضحايا التعذيب والجمعية الإنسانية الدولية للتنمية بلا حدود مع كل المؤسسات والجمعيات المساندة لقافلة العدالة يوصوا بما يلي: تشكيل آلية دولية خاصة لرصد وتوثيق أوضاع الأسرى الفلسطينيين، دعوة المقررين الخاصين المعنيين بالتعذيب وبالاعتقال التعسفي إلى زيارة السجون الإسرائيلية، المطالبة الدول الأعضاء بعدم توفير الحماية السياسية والقانونية لمرتكبي هذه الجرائم. السادة أعضاء المجلس، إن لم تستطيعوا إنفاذ العدالة فالأولى لكم أن تصنعوا لكم سفينة وتذهبون
UN report stands out for overt anti-Semitism. To quote it, Jews are extremists. Why? Because Jews pray where Muslims say they can't. Nazi exterminators also thought practicing Judaism was offensive. The report says it includes incidents that demonstrate wrongful patterns. You missed this pattern. Before this council, Sadati belittled Jewish victims of Jew hatred by claiming anti-Semitism complaints are thrown around like rice at a wedding. Pillay wrote this council's president defending Kotari's claim that the Jewish lobby and its money controls social media. Pillay told the UN press corps anti-Semitism worries are always raised as a diversion. Your 2024 report tried to silence the voices of Jewish victims by redefining anti-Semitism so as to exclude you. Today's anti-Semitic trope: Jews are profiteers, not cultural preservationists. This report excludes anti-Semitic attacks on religious sites, Arabs trashing Jewish sites for a century, Palestinian massacres, targeting synagogues, Jewish schools, Passover Seders, the Yom Kippur War, and October 7th itself on a biblical holiday. The truth is, only Israeli Jews have protected religious freedom and holy site access for Christians, Muslims, and Jews, while Palestinian leader Abbas bans Jewish, quote, filthy feet. But that's not in your report, where the truth goes to die.
Delegates, I want to remind everybody again that you all have the right to express your views about the report or activities of the mandate holders, but this must remain within the accepted framework, ensuring that a sense of respect, permeates our discussions. In particular, no personal attacks against the mandate holders must be made. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the Norwegian Refugee Council.
Members of the Commission, the Norwegian Refugee Council recalls that under international humanitarian law, both the right to request and provide humanitarian assistance are protected legal entitlements, not discretionary political gestures. As the occupying power in the Palestinian territory, Israel is obligated to accept and facilitate relief efforts when the local population is left without essential means of survival. This obligation is not contingent on political approval or security pretexts. Equally vital is the right of the Palestinian people to initiate relief schemes. The State of Palestine holds the sovereign prerogative to assess needs, request international aid, and determine which actors are eligible to assist. Humanitarian organizations also hold the right to offer aid, impartially, and in line with the needs of the affected population. This right must be protected from interference, bureaucratic obstruction, or politicized regulation. When an occupying power gives its consent, as it must, all parties, including third states, must facilitate the rapid and unimpeded passage of relief. Israel obstructs humanitarian relief and protection efforts in Gaza and the West Bank in order to further the wanton goals of forced displacement and territorial acquisition. NRC urges this Council to affirm that denying or obstructing the request or provision of humanitarian aid in the OPT is not just morally indefensible, it is legally prescribed. It is a grave breach of international law, a constituent of atrocity crimes.
Thank you. I give the floor to Al Messan Center for Human Rights for a joint statement.
Mr. President, we commend the Commission of Inquiry for its rigorous work and continuous reporting. In its March report, the Commission detailed Israel's systematic use of sexual, reproductive and other forms of gender-based violence against Palestinians and concluded that such acts are genocidal and used to dominate, oppress and destroy the Palestinian people. In its latest report, it documents widespread and systematic attacks on educational institutions, religious sites and cultural heritage in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, including Gaza. These are not random or collateral. They are part of a deliberate effort